What's up, guys and gals? It's CJ here, your Vegas Insider. It's October 21st, 2019, and we're going to take a break from the college basketball preview series that we've been doing, and we're going to go ahead and focus a little bit on college football today. My top 10 is a blend of what I've seen on the field, along with kind of a predictive measure of what I see coming. It's just the way I'm wired. I bet college football and college basketball futures 365 days a year. So I don't know any other way to do this. This channel is not just about talking about who's good in football. There's a million channels you can go to where they'll tell you who's good and who's not good in college football. My videos are about putting the information out there, but they're also about possibly giving you a chance to make a little jaw in the process. So like for instance, in this top 10 I have today, little spoiler alert. So I have Oregon at number 10 and I have Auburn unranked. Now you might say, well, CJ, that sounds crazy. Auburn beat Oregon head to head. You should have Auburn ahead of Oregon based on what's happened on the field. And I would say, yes, you're probably right for saying that. However, if you look at what's coming, and that's how you make money betting futures. If you look at what's coming, Oregon will be a pretty big favorite, I would think, in all the rest of the games that they play this season. If they play Utah in the Pac-12 championship, they might just be kind of a small favorite. But the point is they'll still be favored to win. It's very possible Oregon could go 12-1 and then have a shot at making the college football playoff. I'm telling you right now, Auburn's not making the college football playoff. Are they a better team than Oregon? Yeah, probably. Especially now that Bo Nix has 7 games under his belt, and he looks a lot better than he did when they played that Week 1 game, you know, his very first start ever as a true freshman against Oregon. Problem with Auburn is the schedule is very unforgiving from here. You already have 1 loss. You're a 2-touchdown underdog on the road in Baton Rouge this week, and then even if by some, miracle you win that game, you got to play Georgia, you got to play Alabama, and then if by even a bigger miracle you win those games, you'll have to play either Georgia or Florida again in the SEC championship game. And there's just no way you're running the table. So I kind of blend the two, and that, I'm just telling you right now, that's why I have Oregon at number 10 and I have Auburn out. I don't think there's any value on betting Auburn futures. Auburn's going to finish the season with at least 3 losses, in my opinion, and that's the only way I know how to do these. So let's go ahead and get to my top 10. I want to talk about another team that's not in the top 10. Wisconsin. My goodness, if you look at the video I made last week, this channel's only a week old, so by the way, if you could subscribe and hit the like button on this video, I'd really appreciate it. It's a brand new channel. I'm trying to get the word out on how to make a little bit of money betting futures, kind of give you a Vegas Insider's look at how I do it day in and day out. But so last week's video, if you look at it, it's got the thumbnail of Bucky Badger on my countdown from last week. I did that because I have a 300-1 Wisconsin future, which I bet in week 1 of the season. After they obliterated South Florida and looked really good, you could still get 300-1 at Westgate. So I went down, I bet it, and it obviously made me look good for the first month and a half of the season, right? So last week in the video, I talked about Wisconsin, and I said that I was excited to have that future, but like the mainstream media being fake news or whatever, I think the mainstream sports media is kind of fake news. Like all I've been hearing about from the ESPN and Fox Sports analysts is, oh, Wisconsin, they're my sexy dark horse pick to win the national championship. Well, if you look at my video from last week, I said, hold on, let's pump the brakes a little bit here on Wisconsin. Yes, their defense was amazing. They had played 6 games, 4 shutouts. The defense pitched, and they had scored as many points as they had given up, right? So I was excited about having that 300-1 future. But what did I say in the video? I said, yes, I'm excited to have 300-1 futures on them, but I said that even if they were fortunate enough to make it into the college football playoff, I just wasn't very confident about Wisconsin winning a natty because you have Jack Cohn at quarterback, and whoever they play in the Big Ten championship, which is going to be Ohio State or Penn State, whoever they play in the college football playoff, if they're even able to win that game, those elite teams and elite coaches are going to take away what you do best. So I said I foresaw those teams limiting Jonathan Taylor, keeping him in check, forcing Jack Coan to beat them. It would have to be on Jack Coan's shoulders to make a play to actually win a game against a team like that. So I said, let's just hold on and back off on Wisconsin for a little bit. I was trying not to get too excited. I was trying not to count my chickens on that future, right? Get my hopes up. Well, what happened last week to Wisconsin? Wisconsin goes on the road and plays an opponent. The opponent limits Jonathan Taylor and forces Jack Coan to make plays down the stretch to beat him. I know Jonathan Taylor had 130 yards in the game, but he had it on about 75 carries. He didn't really have any big explosive plays in that game. So what happens? Wisconsin's up by 9 in the fourth quarter. Jonathan Taylor fumbles. The opposing team gets the ball, drives down the field, and scores. So now you got about 3 minutes left. Wisconsin's up by 2. They're trying to get a couple of first downs and run the clock out, right? Well, they run Jonathan Taylor. They run Jonathan Taylor again. The opposing defense limits him to 5 yards, so it's a 3rd and 5. And Wisconsin, what do they decide to do? They decide to throw the ball and try to win the game with Jack Coan. What happened? Jack Coan made probably the ugliest 7 to 10 yard pass I've ever seen in my life. It was not only was the receiver covered, but it was just a horrible looking ball the second it left his arms. The opposing team intercepted it. It was the easiest interception that guy will ever have in his life. The opposing team takes over at midfield, drives 25 yards, kicks a game-winning field goal, and Wisconsin loses. Kind of like what I said, right? Here's the problem. I said it was going to happen against a good team. It happened against freaking Illinois. Freaking Illinois and freaking Lovie Smith. When I was saying that Wisconsin was going to get out-coached, I wasn't saying they were going to get out-coached by Lovie Smith. So anyway, look, Wisconsin, you're dead to me. You're out of my top 10, and I don't see you ever getting back in my top 10 this season because you're going to Columbus next week, and you're going to get absolutely curb stomped, pistol whipped, insert whatever reference you want that represents a total beatdown, because that's what's going to happen to you this week. Now, could you win that game as a 14-point favorite? Sure, it's possible you could win that game. But in Vegas, we don't bet on things that are remotely possible. We bet on what's likely. And what's likely is you're going to get your feelings hurt for a second week in a row, and you're going to be out of the college football playoff. So now let's get into our top 10. I've already let the cat out of the bag with number 10. We have the Oregon Ducks. Oregon looks good here. Do I think a Pac-12 team could win a natty this year? Absolutely not. The Pac-12 is still a garbage can conference. They suck in both football and basketball, although they actually recruited well in basketball this year, so that's a topic for another video when we get back into college basketball. But the Pac-12 absolutely stinks at football. I thought Washington was going to be a good team this year. They're incredibly mediocre. Oregon went on the road and barely beat that incredible, mediocre Washington team. The good news for Oregon is you really don't have any tough games left on your schedule. As long as you can beat Utah in the Pac-12 title game, you'll be 12-1 and you'll have a chance to make the college football playoff. I don't know if you will, but at least you have a chance. Bad news is, Oregon, if you make the college football playoff, you're going to get absolutely destroyed no matter who you play. There's no way you're beating Ohio State or Alabama or Clemson or Oklahoma or even Penn State. Or even Notre Dame if they somehow snuck in and you got in. Well, I don't think both of those teams could get in. But regardless, you're not winning a game in the playoff. But I have you at number 10 because I think you're going to be 12-1 at the end of the season, and we'll see what happens from there. Number 9, Georgia. Man, oh man, Georgia and Wisconsin, they're the exact same team, aren't they? I mean, if you swapped uniforms and had them run out in the field, like this is almost the same team. You have a game manager at quarterback who I wouldn't trust to beat the opposition ever to actually win a game for you. You have an elite running back. You have an elite offensive line that can lean on teams and push people around and wear them down. You have a really good defense, like an elite level defense. But the same concerns I have for Georgia are the same problems Wisconsin has. A good team and a good coach is going to limit number 7, right, DeAndre Swift, and he's going to make Jake Fromm beat you. And right now it doesn't look like Jake Fromm can beat anybody. I watched the entire Kentucky game. It was nationally televised on ESPN. Georgia's offense looked absolutely terrible. Yes, the offensive line wore Kentucky down. They ran over them in the fourth quarter. But for 40 minutes, you were held scoreless against a terrible Kentucky team. For 40 minutes. You played a terrible South Carolina team the week before, and what'd you score? 17 points, including 2 overtimes? A South Carolina team that Florida just put 38 up on last week. So I have Georgia at number 9 because I say the Georgia-Florida game's a 50-50 toss-up. You could win that game. Like I said, it's a coin flip. And if you win that game, you're going to the SEC championship game. You do have elite level talent. You do have a bye week to try to figure out a passing game to show up in the cocktail party. Maybe Jake Fromm turns the corner. Maybe the bye week, you know, this is the best possible time for Georgia to have a bye week because their passing game looks absolutely atrocious. But maybe they figure something out. And with the level of talent they have, I still think Georgia is a potential contender. And they still have everything in front of them. Georgia at number 9. Number 8. Florida. The cocktail party in 2 weeks is going to be a lot of fun because if you asked me a month ago, I would have said Florida has very little chance in this game. But Florida, Kyle Trask gets better every week. He gets better and better every week, and I'm loving my 1,000-to-1 future on Florida more and more. If you look at a video I made last week, I think it was like the 3rd video I ever made. It's only a 3-minute video, and it says, I risked a pizza to win a new car. I was just talking about a $15 future I bet on Florida at 1,000-to-1. Well, that number's dropped considerably this week. People are starting to catch on to the fact that Florida's legit. The offenses look good, and now that the passing game is opening up with Trask, and teams are realizing that Trask can beat them, it's opening up the running game a little bit. I said in the video last week that the offensive line couldn't move a cardboard box backwards. That still may be true against the better teams. But look, against South Carolina, they got the run game going. The offense looked good. Trask threw a career-high 4 touchdown passes. They put 38 up on South Carolina on the road against the South Carolina team that limited Georgia to 17 at Georgia. So Florida's improving. They're getting better and better. I love the risk-reward on the future line, which I will talk about at the end. After I'm done ranking, we'll put up the futures. You have a bye week this week, but get ready for what I think is going to be one of the most fun cocktail parties in years. Number 7, Notre Dame. I know a lot of people are going to disagree with this pick here. I understand that Notre Dame is a long shot to make the playoff. They still need a lot of help. But Notre Dame has a very good chance of going undefeated the rest of the way. I'm shocked. I looked at the opening line today in the Michigan game, and I was shocked to see that they were a 1.5, 2-point underdog. I'm telling you right now, I'm going to be moneylining Notre Dame this week. I don't need the 1.5. I'd rather just get a little better price and take the money line. Maybe you'll get even money on the money line. Michigan had a very tough fight on the road at Penn State last week. Notre Dame had a bye. Michigan just doesn't know how to win big games, period. I think Notre Dame is more of a complete team. I like the way they throw the ball. They've been running the ball very well the last few weeks. And with a week off to prepare, I think Brian Kelly's a good enough coach to use that week properly. This is where I think Michigan's season just goes into a complete tailspin, if it isn't already. So I think Notre Dame's going to win this game, and then they just have an easy run of it the rest of the way. Their one loss is not a bad loss. It's a 6-point loss on the road to Georgia. We'll see what happens with Georgia in 2 weeks against Florida. But, you know, I still like the risk-reward here with Notre Dame at the future odds that they have. I know they need a little bit of help. And let me say this also really quick. I had Notre Dame at number 8 last week. I put them at number 7 this week. But even though they moved up in my poll, they're kind of a loser from last week to this week, and I'll tell you why. Notre Dame needs an Oregon loss. I wouldn't feel too good about Notre Dame's chances of making the playoff if they end 11-1 and Oregon ends 12-1 with a conference championship. So you need Oregon to lose another game. I thought they were going to lose that game to Washington last week, but they didn't. You also need Michigan to look good because your best win of the season is going to be against Michigan if you get it this week. Well, Michigan dropped another game to Penn State. And you need Oklahoma to lose. Now, I didn't think Oklahoma was going to lose to West Virginia, but if you're a Notre Dame fan, you have to keep your eye on Oklahoma. I'm not fond of the Big 12 this year. I actually think it's pretty bad. Texas is showing you that they're just not a good football team. They needed a last-second field goal at home to beat Kansas. Kansas is one of the worst teams in the entire Power 5. Texas is not a good team. Oklahoma, you barely beat them. Baylor's a paper tiger at 7-0. They're not a good football team. Baylor should have lost to Texas Tech. The refs gave Baylor that game with a horrible missed call there at the end. So I'm just not a fan of the Big 12. TCU looks bad this year. Oklahoma State's bad this year. There's just not a lot to like about in that conference. Now, that being said, if Oklahoma wins out, they're going to be in the playoff. So if you're a Notre Dame fan, you're going to need Iowa State or Baylor or Oklahoma State. You're going to need one of those teams to upset Oklahoma. So keep your eye on the Sooners and hope for a loss. Number 6, Penn State. Positives about Penn State. KJ Hamlin is a beast. I mean, that guy is a real playmaker. The defense is continuing to do what I talked about last week in my top 10. They live in opposing teams' backfields. They got a lot of pressure on Shea Patterson. They made his life difficult. But not like Wisconsin. It's a different set of circumstances than Wisconsin. But here's another disclaimer. I have a big future on Penn State too. I got Penn State at very high odds early in the season, but I'm pumping the brakes on Penn State. What makes me nervous about Penn State is not that they're going to get out coached. I think James Franklin's a really good coach, but they just take plays and even full quarters off offensively. Their offense can look so good at times because they do have playmakers like KJ Hamlin, but they can sleepwalk through entire quarters in games. And the way that they tried to give away the Michigan game last week really concerns me. They outplayed Michigan the entire game. If you look at the score, it was 28-21. In a way, it wasn't that close because Penn State led throughout. They had at least a 2-touchdown lead almost the entire game. But then not only did it end 28-21, but they needed basically a goal line stand, I think a 4th down from like the 2-yard line to preserve the win, or else Michigan would have tied the game. They were 2 or 3 yards away from tying the game. So, there's a lot to like about Penn State, but as a true national championship contender, I'm just not sure yet. It's just not all there yet. But hey, it'll work itself out because you travel to Ohio State. So if you can somehow win that game, then you'll obviously win the Big Ten East, and you're obviously a natty contender at that point. Number 5, Oklahoma. Yes, I think Oklahoma's really good. Yes, the defense is improved by leaps and bounds over what they were last year. But they just haven't played anybody yet. And I understand you can only play who's on your schedule, but it's going to be a big difference playing West Virginia and playing Kansas and playing Baylor and TCU to go from that to where you're in the playoff and now you're playing Clemson. You're playing a defense full of future NFL players. You're playing Alabama. Even though Alabama, their defense looks nowhere near as good as they've been, they still have Nick Saban wearing the headset. Saban's one of the best defensive schemers of all time. If you play Ohio State, their defense looks absolutely lights out. If you play LSU, LSU's offense can run with you, and they have better athletes on defense than you. LSU's looked a little up and down on defense, but they have better athletes on the defensive side of the ball than you do, and their offense is just as good as yours. So, again, with Oklahoma, I'm going to pump the brakes here. I think there's value on the current future line, and we'll get to that in a second. But it's kind of like I'll believe it when I see it come playoff time. Number 4, LSU. Like I said, this is a blend of what past and what I see in the future in this countdown. If I were just ranking teams based on what we've seen so far, I'd have LSU, I'd have possibly number 1, for sure number 2. I wouldn't have them any lower than number 2. The thing is, LSU's still got a gauntlet of a schedule. They got to play Auburn this week. Granted, they are a 2-touchdown favorite, but then they got to travel to Tuscaloosa. They still got to play A&M, who's kind of become their de facto rival. Well, every team's a rival in the SEC, but after that crazy 8 overtime game last year they had with A&M, it looks like A&M's kind of becoming a rivalry game. I know LSU recruits a lot in the state of Texas, so that's another reason for A&M to kind of become LSU's rival in that conference. LSU, like Oklahoma, I just ended Oklahoma's report with, I'll believe it when I see it in the playoff. Same thing with LSU. I'll believe it when I see it as far as you beating Alabama. Now, breaking news, I mean, in case you've been living under a rock and you follow college football, there's no way you can't know that Tua got hurt last week. Tua may or may not be back for the LSU game. If he's 100%, I'm telling you right now, I like Alabama to win that game. It's another case of I'll believe it when I see it. LSU cannot beat Alabama. They cannot beat Nick Saban. And I guess at some point maybe they will. Or maybe they'll just never beat him until Saban retires. I don't know. But if you're gonna give me $100 and say, straight up who's gonna win the game, you get $100 if you pick who's gonna win, Alabama, LSU. I'm gonna take Alabama with a healthy Tua. It's just that simple. So that's why I don't have LSU higher. You still have a tough schedule. The road for you still goes through Tuscaloosa, and that's a very difficult road. Now, if Tua doesn't play in the game and Mac Jones is starting for Alabama, then I'd say, you're probably going to win that game and things change. But I can only go based off of what I know right now. And you got to prove to me you can beat Alabama, and it just hasn't looked good in forever. I know your offense looks better. I know Ed Orgeron is doing great things at LSU. Don't get me wrong. And another thing is, even though they have the best 2 wins in Florida and Texas, that Texas win is starting to look worse and worse, just like it is for Oklahoma. Same thing applies to LSU. That Texas win doesn't look that spectacular right now. Texas is not a good football team, especially on the defensive side of the ball. So for it now, I'm keeping you at number 4, and beat Alabama, and then you'll probably vault you would vault all the way to number 1. Number 3, Alabama. I had Alabama at number 1 last week. A lot can change in a week. Your defense doesn't look like an Alabama defense. I'll be the first to admit that. Tua's status for the LSU game is up in the air. He's not going to play this week against Arkansas, but that doesn't matter. You'll probably still win by 30 or 40. And then you get a bye week, which helps greatly, and then you play LSU. So his status for that game is questionable as of right now. But regardless, the defense has definitely taken a step back. There's no way we can deny that. I watched the entire Alabama-Tennessee game last week. The score was it looked like more of a blowout than the game was. It was 28-13, if I remember correctly. Tennessee was at Alabama's goal line. They had a 4th and inches from the goal line. Garantano tried to sneak the ball. He tried to jump over the pile to score the touchdown. The ball came loose. The Alabama kid scooped up the ball and ran 100 yards for a touchdown. So that was a 14-point play. So instead of the game being 28-20 and being a 1-score game, it was 35-13 and the game was over. The game was much closer than the score. So yes, there are some, and Tennessee's terrible. Make no mistake about it. So yes, Alabama, there is some legitimate concern on the defensive side of the ball. But let me just say something right now. Again, this is this channel is called Vegas Insider. Everything I do has a sports betting flavor to it. And I'm telling you right now, there's not a person who lives in this town who has gotten rich betting against Nick Saban. I'm just telling you. One of my golden rules to betting college football is I don't bet against Nick Saban. Is he going to lose at some point? Well, yeah, I mean, he got killed against Clemson in the championship game last year, right? I mean, but that is the exception. That is not the norm. So I'm just going to stay away from this LSU-Alabama game. You have the number 3 team against the number 4 team. Whoever wins that game will probably move to number 2 at least, possibly number 1. But I'm taking a wait-and-see approach on that game because I don't know who's going to win that game. But I ain't betting against Saban. And I'm telling you right now, if you want to have a future in betting college football, that's a good rule to adopt. Number 2, Clemson. I know a lot of people are going to have an issue with this one too, but look, other than the scare against North Carolina, Clemson has actually destroyed every single team they've played this year. Clemson is not as bad as people are making it as people are making them out to be. Like I said, I think maybe the mainstream sports media is fake news. How all the analysts at Fox and ESPN were overhyped on Wisconsin. I think they're piling on way too much to Clemson. They're trying to make a story about how bad Clemson is when there's not really a story there. And to be honest, probably the best thing that could have happened to Clemson was that scare against North Carolina, because they've come out focused and absolutely kicked the crap out of every team since. Now, I understand Trevor Lawrence is throwing interceptions. I get that. Let's talk about that. He's still going to be the number 1 overall pick in the NFL draft when he comes out in 2 years. He still has unbelievable receivers who can go up and, turn bad throws into touchdowns. So I think that might be part of it, is that he has so much confidence in his receivers, T. Higgins and Justin Ross, that he's willing to put the ball in a dangerous position just thinking his guy will come up with it. We'll see if he fixes that or not. But my money's going to be on the guy who's going to be the number 1 overall pick in the draft in 2 years. I think he'll get it fixed. Another thing about Clemson, they're starting to get Travis Etienne going running the ball. And Travis Etienne is going to be a top 10 NFL pick when he comes out, I would assume, after this year. Anybody who passes on this guy who needs a running back is a complete idiot, because he is an explosive playmaker. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. Travis Etienne's a stud. And they're getting him going now. The defense is elite. The defense is a brick wall, just like it always is. And the schedule is the easiest of any team in this top 10. So Clemson's not losing a game this season, at least before the playoff. I'm telling you right now, you can write it in pen. Clemson is going to the college football playoff. So they're the only team on this list that I know for sure is going to win out and be in the college football playoff. So that's why I have them ranked this high. Have they looked better than LSU this season? I don't know. I mean, probably not, I guess. But their defense looks better than LSU's. Their running game looks better than LSU's. So that's 2 big factors right there, right? Does LSU have a running back as good as Travis Etienne? No. Has Joe Burrow played better than Trevor Lawrence? Yes. Could that change? Could LSU get a better running back than Travis Etienne this season? No. LSU is not all of a sudden going to find a running back who plays better than Travis Etienne this season. Is it possible Trevor Lawrence outplays Joe Burrow from this point in the season for the rest of the season? Yes, it's possible. You're talking about the future number 1 pick in the draft. So I'm going with the tradition. I'm going with the 5-star athletes up and down the field. I'm going with the easy schedule. Clemson is in the college football playoff. They're in my top 10 at number 2. Number 1, the Ohio State. Look, Ohio State just looks absolutely off the chart elite on both sides of the football. They run the ball outstanding with the quarterback, Justin Fields, and J.K. Dobbins. How I said that Clemson's getting Etienne going, Ohio State's getting J.K. Dobbins going. I mean, he's looking like a Heisman candidate the last few weeks. I mean, I don't think he has any chance to win the Heisman, but I'm just saying he looks like that type of player. Add in Justin Fields, who's been unbelievably efficient running and throwing the ball, very similar to what Jalen Hurts is doing at Oklahoma. But you have a much better defense with Chase Young and the rest of that crazy defense than a team like Oklahoma has. And Ohio State leads the nation in scoring margin. So, I mean, let's just even take a look at the Northwestern game. Is Northwestern a good team? No, they're not. They're terrible. But Ohio State went on the road on primetime national television and beat Ohio State by 49. What happened when beat Northwestern by 49? What happened when Wisconsin played Northwestern? They played them at home and barely beat them. So I just don't think Wisconsin has any chance in this game coming up. I would lay the 2 touchdowns. But regardless, maybe somehow Wisconsin with that defense can somehow keep it close. But they're not coming out of Columbus with a win. Ohio State's going to win that game. The whole season is going to come down. This is going to be a great game. Ohio State and Penn State coming up in a few weeks. Also in the shoe there in Columbus. Whoever wins that game has got the fast track to the college football playoff. But, I mean, if you're asking me right now, I'd love to see Penn State win that game with the future I have on Penn State, but I just don't see it happening. Ohio State's a complete football team. They have no weaknesses whatsoever. I see Ohio State being in the playoff. And even though their path is harder than Clemson's to make the playoff, like I said, these videos are a blend. I have Ohio State at 1 and Clemson at 2 because Ohio State has just looked better than Clemson. I think Clemson's looked okay, but Ohio State's just looked better. Ohio State is your #1 team for this week, and October 21st, heading into week 9 of the college football season. Go ahead and put the future odds up. Like I said before, it's hard to find a lot of value in futures when you're this far into the season. We are 2/3 of the way through the college football regular season. And how do I know that? Because most teams have played 8 games. There are a few that have only played 7, but most of the teams have played 8 games. You play 12 regular season games. 8 out of 12 is 2/3 or 67%. And even me with my California public school education can figure that one out. So we're 2/3 of the way through. The value is getting less and less on the future lines, but let's go ahead and put them up anyway for all these teams. Now, what I do for you on this channel is I shop the best future line for you. These lines that you see are the absolute best number you can get in town as of today. I go ahead and do all this work for you. I have every single sportsbook app on my phone in town. In the state of Nevada, I have the Reno apps on my phone as well. So trust me when I tell you what I'm putting up here is the absolute best number you can get in the state of Nevada. So what do I like based on what's here? You know, like I said, I did the video on Florida last week, risking a pizza to win a car at 1,000 to 1. They've been dropped significantly. You can still get 300 to 1. That's only at MGM. Everywhere else, the highest is like 150 or 200 to 1. Some places that only have 100 to 1 now in Florida. I still like 300 to 1 because, again, it's risk a little to win a lot. I give them a 50-50 shot to beat Georgia in the cocktail party in 2 weeks. I think a lot of it revolves around the 2 starters that are out for Florida's defense, Zuniga and the other linebacker. I can't remember his name. I'm off the top of my head right now. But if Florida's at full strength defensively, I give them a closer to a 60% chance to win that game. If both of those guys are out, I think it drops to slightly under 50. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. The point is, at this risk reward, say you throw 25 bucks on Florida at 300. That means you're risking 25 bucks to win 7,500. And at the very least, you're going to get a lot of entertainment in the cocktail party in 2 weeks, because that'd be a very exciting game now that you got a little cash riding on it. So I like that at 300. What else? Notre Dame, not really. Also, I put on that video about risking the pizza to win a car. I showed you that I had a future on Notre Dame at 200. It's now dropped to 150. And also, even though I moved them up in my poll, I told you that Notre Dame was a loser last week, even though they had a bye, because Oregon won, because Penn State beat Michigan. That was bad on both notes for Notre Dame, because they need Penn State to lose a game, and they need Michigan to be good, because that's going to be their best win of the season if they get it this week. And so I think the value has dropped substantially on Notre Dame. Who else do we have? OU. This is the best line in town by far. Just about everybody has 4 to 1 on OU. If you go to Circa, Circa is basically the downtown group of casinos, which is the D, the Golden Gate, and then it'll be the new Circa Hotel coming next year. But, you know, you could bet this line at the D and at the Golden Gate Casino downtown. So it's worth it to go out of your way and go downtown to take 6 to 1, because everybody else has 4 to 1. I think there might be some value on OU there, just because the Big 12 sucks, and I think they could easily run the table. Like I said, it's kind of I'll believe it when I see it as far as winning in the playoff, but at 6 to 1, I think the odds are okay there. Also with LSU, plus 525, also at Circa. Same thing. It's a good number based on how good LSU has looked. If you risk a note to win $525. That's not a bad risk reward. LSU's a really good team. But like I said, it's kind of like Oklahoma. I'll believe it when I see it as far as beating Alabama. Now, here's the thing to keep your eye on. If you find out that Tua's not playing, let's say we hear in a week or so that Tua's missing the LSU game. If Circa still has this number up at plus 525, then I'd go run, not walk. I would run downtown and bet this number. Because just the value goes up exponentially if Tua's not playing in that game. The one I like, though, here is, the one I like the most is Clemson at 4-1. You could get this at the South Point or the Westgate. Clemson's going to be in the college football playoff. They're going to make the college football playoff with an elite future NFL running back, with an elite future NFL quarterback, with a brick wall of a defense, with a defending national championship team, and with a coach who's won, what, 2 of the last 3 natties? And you're getting that at 4-1. So basically you're getting them at 4-1 to win 2 games. So I think there's real value there. This is a play where if you have the budget, if you can risk 250 to win 1,000, I think Clemson has a really good shot at putting a G in your pocket here. So anyway, that's it. We'll continue, next week after Saturday's games. Things change, so I'll get you all the best future odds next week. Quick Heisman rundown. I would stay away from Heisman futures at this point because Tua's hurt and he's not playing against Arkansas, which would have been one of the worst teams he would have played all year. He probably would have had 400 yards and 5 or 6 touchdowns had he played against Arkansas. So I think Tua's chances to win the Heisman have greatly diminished. All you have left realistically is Joe Burrow and Jalen Hurts. And both guys are like maybe 2-1. Maybe you could find 2-1, 3-2. There's just no value there. I'd stay away from Heisman futures at this point. So anyway, that's it. That's the college football rundown for this week. I will go back to college basketball and start counting down my top 25 season preview. And the college basketball season is right around the corner. The coaches poll just came out for college basketball. So if you're a college basketball fan, you might want to check that out. Anyway, again, if you got anything out of this video and think that hopefully I can, help you make a little cash down the road, feel free to subscribe and hit the like button. Also, leave your comments. I'm very excited to read all your comments, whether you agree or disagree. Let me know what you like, didn't like. Let me know what you agree with or disagree with. Anytime you make a list like this, top 10, you're always going to have some people who agree and a lot of people who disagree. But I'm all about a healthy debate. So feel free to do that. And thanks again for watching, and have a great day.